President Biden is meeting with 6 Republican senators to discuss a bipartisan compromise on his more than $2 trillion infrastructure plan. Today's meeting comes as a major bridge crossing over the Mississippi River is shut down. Officials found a crack in the Hernando de Soto Bridge during a routine inspection Tuesday. That bridge is on Interstate 40 and connects Arkansas and Tennessee. It is one of dozens of projects that desperately need funding. Part of President Biden's infrastructure plan is to allocate $621 billion to road and bridge repairs. It also includes electric car incentives and elder care assistance. Republicans favor a plan that costs about a third of the size, but President Biden told MSNBC last night, with or without Republican support, he'll find a way to get things done.
I want to make it clear. I want to get a bipartisan deal on as much as we can get a bipartisan deal on. And that means roads, bridges, broadband, all infrastructure. But I'm not giving up on the fact that we have, 2 million women not able to go back to work because all the daycare centers are closed. They're out of business. And so they can't go back to work. I'm not going to give up on a whole range of things that go to the question of productivity, of increasing jobs, increasing employment, increasing revenues. I'm not really going to give up on that.
Joining us to talk more about this is CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe. Hi, Ed. So as we mentioned, the president is talking with Republican senators about his infrastructure spending plan. What can we expect out of today's meeting?
You talk to both sides of the equation here, Tanya. They're hoping that the 6 Republican senators invited over to talk to the president emerge from this meeting with a sense that the 2 parties will be able to actually work on this issue over the next few weeks and months and finally strike a deal. GOP aides had told CBS News in the last 24 hours or so that they're basically going to give the White House one more week after this meeting to signal that they're serious about counter-offering their counteroffer to the president's roughly $4 trillion set of proposals. They're coming with about $568 billion of ideas, but they don't really specify exactly how they would pay for this. There's been talk of possibly using tolls and fees on electric car vehicles, maybe even fiddling with the gas tax to help pay for this. But the president's argument, the one that Democrats are making, is if you do that, it'll mostly mean that middle-class working Americans are the ones paying for this, not wealthier Americans, not corporations, which Democrats would argue are the ones that should be helping to fit the bill. But Republicans have said they don't want to do anything to touch the 2017 tax plan that was put in place that the president would propose to pull back to help pay for this. So you not only have disagreements still about how to pay for it, you have disagreements over what exactly actually is infrastructure worth paying for with federal dollars.
So, Ed, what specifically then are Republicans pushing for? It sounds like they're pushing on both ends, right? The side in terms of how they're going to pay for it and what they want done. In terms of what it is that they want this infrastructure bill to include and not include, do you have some details there? And what does the president signal he's willing to compromise on?
It hasn't entirely specifically signaled what he's willing to compromise on just yet. But for Republicans, they're talking about traditional physical infrastructure. Fixing that bridge you mentioned in Mississippi, for example, roads, pipelines, airports, train stations, things of that variety, not as what one of them called soft infrastructure, or the proposal to boost funding for home health care, the child care tax credits, the expanding child care access or pre-kindergarten classes and free community college for kids as they come out of high school. Those kinds of programs Republicans dismiss as liberal wish list items and not necessarily the kind of job-creating, actual, fixing the nation's infrastructure kind of projects that should be included in a conversation about what they believe to be infrastructure. You've seen over the last few weeks Democrats pushing the idea that infrastructure isn't just those physical structures and things that we use to get to and from home to wherever we're going, but it's also things that help sort of hold up society. Again, childcare, schools, education in general that help the workforce and working families get the job done. This is a conversation that they'll have today. This is a debate that will continue. And there's always a possibility that you can get some kind of big bipartisan plan on all those traditional physical infrastructure ideas and then ram through the other things with Democrats only in some kind of a budget bill later this year. But remember, there are Democrats who are concerned about doing all that as well, guys like Joe Manchin and Senator Kirsten Sinema of Arizona, for example, who both were here earlier this week talking to the president one-on-one as he tries to gauge where exactly is the sweet spot when it comes to this issue.
Right. And of course, nobody expects them to come out of this meeting with a deal all tied up in a bow. This is really, just sort of the beginning of getting their hands around it. But how many more of these meetings do you think President Biden is willing to have before he says, all right, we're just enough, we're going forward?
It's a good question. I think we've probably got about 2 more weeks of this back and forth between members of both parties before he leaves it to lawmakers to really get into the details. He's happy to have conversations with lawmakers all the time about these kinds of things, knowing that if you give him time and space, the two sides can come to an agreement eventually. He's a former legislator who believes that as vice president, he wasn't perhaps utilized enough, and that the president, Obama, that he worked with, didn't perhaps do enough to really coax and goad and cajole with Congress to get them to deals that would have been more to his liking. Biden's perfectly willing and able to do that, and he's going to continue to do it. And that's what's going to make this a somewhat confusing and maybe frustrating process at times for people, is that he's fine if this thing stretched several weeks or months because there's no urgent deadline attached. All he wants is to see people still talking, trying to get to some kind of an agreement. The goal at this point would be to get it done by August, which means that to some extent the meetings you're referencing, the how much longer can he do this, has to be over really by the end of this month.
All right, so we still have a few more of those to go. All right, well, Ed O'Keefe at the White House, thank you so much for joining us.
Take care.